Hey, this is the Old Gaming Geezer. Welcome along to another episode of Shuttles That Never Flew. The shuttle we are looking at here is my version of the Venture Star, made by Lockheed Martin, and what you're seeing is an approach and landing test here. This was something that was being developed in the 1990s by Lockheed Martin, and it was going to replace the space shuttle, and it was going to be a single stage to orbit reusable space plane, and it was going to operate at a fraction of the cost. This thing was unmanned, and it was a cargo carrier only. However, it could carry, it was designed to be able to carry human cargo as well. And it used the aerospike engines. As you can see, I've got a whole rake of aerospike engines at the back there. This was recorded a few weeks ago. This is with the 32-bit version of KSP, so it's heavily modded here. But then, you know, we'll switch over to the more recent version soon enough. But as you can see, I'm bringing this into land very nicely. It glides quite well, but it does not have the thrust-to-weight ratio I need with the in-game aerospike engines. So anyway, this Venture Star was going to be about a tenth of the cost to run than the NASA space shuttle, and Lockheed Martin were going to own it and lease it to NASA. They weren't going to actually build it for NASA, and the US government was heavily involved in the funding for this, and it was very much ahead of its time. It was really, really advanced ideas at the time. Here we have a version of it that I tried to launch into the air like a rocket. Now, as I said, I couldn't get the proper thrust-to-weight ratio with the aerospike engines in-game because they're just not powerful enough, so I needed to use solid rocket boosters. And at this point, I think I'd added way more aerospike engines to try and get it better thrust-to-weight ratio, but I still needed the solid rocket boosters to get it off the launch pad. The real one would not have had solid rocket boosters. And this one here is going to be a failure because the back is way too heavy, and it's got something like 12 aerospike engines, 15 aerospike engines on the back. I can't remember. Yeah, it looks like 15. I could barely count them there. And the back of this is just way too heavy. So I dropped it down to about, I think there's a 9 or something on the back there, or 8. And again, I needed the solid rocket boosters to get this off the ground, to get it into space. And this is probably my first proper successful flight that I had with it. Drop the solid rocket boosters. And, of course, we follow our prograde into orbit, although it's following it quite fast there, so I have to switch back to just keep it pointing forward. And we're burning through the field pretty fast, but I'm pretty sure we're going to get into orbit at this point. I can say we're pretty sure I'm going to get into orbit because I recorded this a week ago, and I'm only recording the voiceover now. I know what happens. I spoiled myself. To get this to work, I had to take a lot of liberties. This thing is quite large. It's got three orange tanks inside the lifting body, and it's got several other tanks, smaller tanks as well. So it is quite heavy when it gets off the ground. Or is it 4? No, it's 4. No, it's 2 orange tanks and 2 of the full-size grey tanks. And then there's a couple other small tanks in there as well to bring the thrust, to bring the Delta V up and the weight more forward, to try and offset those enormous amount of aerospike engines at the back. So eventually, as you can see here, I get into space, and there we go. We got into orbit. I got it into orbit. I was so happy. This is the first time that I ever got this thing into orbit. I was very pleased. And look at that. Isn't that just beautiful? That's just beautiful. Yeah, with the sun behind it. It's gorgeous. Gorgeous. The Venture Star was very well liked. The design was very well liked, and it was actually used in some science fiction TV shows at the time. There I'm getting ready to get into return. I'm trying to get back to the Space Center here. Well, you'll see what happens. But the design of this was very well liked, and it was used in the intro to Star Trek Enterprise, and also a ship in Babylon 5 was based on this as well. So now I'm coming down, and because I've got this huge lifting body, I thought, I'm going to use this to slow down as much as possible in the upper atmosphere while there's no flash heating. So I turn it way up, almost 90 degrees. This is about 60 degrees on my angle of attack there, 60 degrees off my prograde, and I start to heat up. There's the wings that are used for the panels do not cover everything, so something inside is heating up in the airstream, and what it is the power system. There are some RTGs and there's some batteries in there, and they are heating up. And at this point, I'm trying to slow down, and they're getting hotter and hotter and hotter. Now I've slowed down so much I'm not going to make it to the KSC from here. And those batteries and the RTGs, they're just heating up now, and there's nothing I can do. They are going to explode, and I'm going to lose control because there we go. So the batteries and my RTGs, I have no power now. The only power generation going on here is from the engines, and you can see there in the top right-hand corner the power is going down. But when I fire the engines, the power goes back up a little bit. Because without power, I have no control. No control over my ailerons and my flight surfaces, my control surfaces. So I have to start running the engine, intermittently to try and generate a little power. There we go, we almost lost power there, but I have very little fuel left, so this is going to be bad. Like now I've run out of fuel at this point. I'm pretty sure I've got a tiny bit of fuel left, but I let the power run out, and now I can't even burn the engines, burn that last bit of fuel to generate even a tiny bit more power. Now the plane flipped there because I fast forward. I went into physics warp. I did not actually do that. I have zero control. I have no control of anything here. The plane is just gliding on its own, and that's actually pretty good. The control surfaces are locked where they were when I was using it, so... And it's staying stable, even though it's going sideways, as you can see, because the twin rudders on the back are angled. I'm quite surprised it's flying pretty stable. But this is not an issue. This is not an error with the ship. This is pilot error that caused this. I made a mistake, and this thing is going to crash because of the mistake. And boom! There it goes. It crashed. But not to be deterred, I do it again. Now, while this is coming down, the Venture Star was cancelled in 2001, and the reason why it was cancelled is quite... there's a lot of different reasons why it was cancelled, but the main one is it used these ultralight fuel tanks. They were like really, really high tech. This ultralight material, I can't remember off the top of my head what it was, and it was this honeycomb pattern, and it was really ahead of its time. The problem was it was so far ahead of its time they couldn't actually get it to work. So they actually built I think it was a 1.5 size test ship called the X-33, and when they were fueling it up, the fuel tanks failed. The fuel tanks broke because the technology to build these fuel tanks didn't actually exist at the time, and the US government decided that just to kill the project because of this. And it's unfortunate because the engines were going to work perfectly, and there was a lot more reasons than just that. See, also the US military was involved, and they were demanding certain functionalities which were changing the configuration of the ship, which was causing the problems with the fuel tank, because the configuration of the ship that the US Army wanted was going to change the center of mass of the ship, which would have affected its flight characteristics and blah, blah. There's a lot of reasons why the Venture Star project was cancelled. The main one being the engines, but there was more to it than the engines, the fuel tanks, but there was more to it than that. So I'm actually very carefully taking this down and really being careful not to overheat those RTGs and the batteries, more so the RTGs, because if I lose the batteries, I can still fly it with the RTGs. So the failure during the test of it was this composite cryogenic hydrogen tank, which was the problem, and ultimately the Venture Star was cancelled because the technical advances were just too much for them to be able to do, which is a shame because it's quite a nice quite a nice plane. So I've still got this under control. I've still got a little bit of fuel in this, but at this point I don't really think I need it. I'm bringing this thing down very carefully. Because I figured I was going to bring it down. I was going to use my quick save from orbit to get this thing back down and not crash it and not make the same mistake. Now, if the plane had failed because of some design issue, then it was going to be some design issue. But in this case, it was a pilot issue, so I had to redo the landing. Now, because this thing slowed down so much in a high altitude, it's obviously, as you can see, we're not landing anywhere near the KSC. We're going to land the Venture Star out in the desert. And I'm actually scared at this point that I'm going too slowly, that we're going to stall out. So very soon now I'm going to start burning the engine. There we go, burning the engines, get a little bit of thrust, and try and get this thing. And I turned them off. Why did I turn them off? I can't remember. It was a week ago that I recorded this, so I can't remember. And they're back on again, just to get a little extra speed so we don't stall out and crash into one of those cacti that are down there in the ground. So we're coming down. Flare a bit just to slow down our descent, and we pop down onto the surface of the desert to the west of the Kerbal Space Center. And there we have it. There is my version of the Lockheed Martin Venture Star. I couldn't do it exactly the way I was supposed to do it. Also, I couldn't fit a cargo bay in there because I just needed so much fuel. Yeah, I like it. Hey, if you like this video, why don't you hit like below, and maybe you might want to subscribe. This is the Old Gaming Geezer, signing off. Good night, farewell, Auf Wiedersehen, adieu.